Hey everybody, welcome to Square 2's B2B Big Story video series. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO and Chief Revenue Scientist here at Square 2. And over the past 20 years of working with B2B businesses, most companies we've met are missing their big story. And it's one of the reasons why their lead generation and revenue generation sometimes comes up short. In this 4-part video series, we're going to be talking about how to fix it, and we're actually going to show you what good messaging is and what you should be looking for with your company. In the first episode, we're calling Bland to Boring, the state of B2B messaging. My guests are Julie Golden, Creative Director at Square 2, and Bob McCarthy, Director of Content Strategy at Square 2. And we're going to help you change how you think about B2B messaging. In short, great messaging isn't just for B2C companies. B2B companies should have, and they should expect, and they should be working on creating emotional, compelling, and engaging stories for their businesses. In this first episode, we'll show you what great messaging looks like and how you can get an amazing big story for your business. Also, stay tuned until the end of the show because there are exciting offers for everyone to take advantage of. So, Bob, Julie, what is messaging? What do we mean by the big story?
Well, typically what we mean by the big story is how you tell the world about who you are. But in terms of messaging, we are looking to create a more compelling story. It's not just who you are, but what you're doing and why you're doing it that draws people in and tells a story that is interesting and emotive so that people want to talk to you. It's not just blah, here's who we are, which has typically been the story in B2B in recent years.
Yeah, I tend to think of it them as separate things, sort of being part and parcel. I think of the message being that quick soundbite, that really impactful little headline that we're all used to seeing, that generally leads into the big story. It's the opening chapter that makes me want to turn the page, and then I can go on and on from there about my company, my business, my solution.
So the big story is a longer tale of everything you are and everything you do and why I should do business with you.
Yeah, the message.
The message is that.
It's that little powerful morsel that wants me to eat the rest of the meal. It's that first taste, and you're just like, yes, now bring me the rest of it.
Nice.
Yeah, I often describe it as emotional and compelling and engaging. And I find that we know it when we get there because you feel something inside. I think like for B2B companies, they don't often strive for that emotional connection. Like we've actually talked about, some of our clients have literally like shed a tear when we've shown them their message because it's touched them in a way that we're trying to create that for their businesses, for their prospects.
And there's a good reason for that because, just because it's a B2B business doesn't mean there wasn't a reason why they started the business in the first place, and to finally have the right words, stories, pictures, emotions that connect to the whole reason they led into a business is a really emotive moment for our clients as well.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see with B2B companies is when we describe that message, big story relationship, and you break it onto these separate parts, it's not like they don't get it. They get that there's a message. They're just like, my message is simple. We do managed IT, and you need managed IT, and then we'll go from there. It's like nobody cares about anything else beyond that, and so they hit that message as directly as possible, and then hoping you'll come in and want to learn more from that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've also learned by doing this for so long is people are sometimes confused by what messaging is. So, I mean, is messaging branding? I think there's a little bit of a confusion in the marketplace. People sometimes think the two are the same. Why don't you start, Bob? How do you look at that?
I think there can be some overlap there for sure. Like if somebody came and said we need some branding, we would certainly create a great message for them with some great design, but that might also include a logo and other elements that come into play. When we think of messaging, at Square 2 in particular, it almost always does trickle down into this larger story. It's not just that message, that headline, that visual. what are you going to do with it? How is it going to support every other goal that you have? How are we going to use it to create content and campaigns and sales scripts? So it really is that the message is used much more broadly and really globally across everything that they do.
It's probably why a lot of people confuse the two, because messaging is a piece of a larger brand message, right? So, messaging can change over time, but your overall brand feel, look, story is something more constant, perhaps, over time. So I could see why our clients might be confused, but, at the essence of their brand development is this story and this message that we need to help them tell the world about.
Got it.
I think there's one other aspect of it is that branding, while not permanent, you see big brands constantly go through, they're not changing it every year, 18 months, whereas it's not uncommon. We often do make a recommendation like, let's revisit your messaging. It's been out there for a year, 18 months. It is something that you do go back to and work on or reinvent more often than you would a brand, which is a bit more semi-permanent.
That's a great point. I think companies need to look at their messaging more frequently. Maybe every year at least, to consider whether it's still relevant or and needs to be adjusted. And I don't think many B2B businesses do that.
Absolutely.
Right.
It can be very invigorating. We all, things become white noise. You see something after a while, whether it's your customers, and 18 months, 2 years, that might be a good opportunity to put something in front of people who are being introduced to you for the first time or the first few times. But you can really invigorate your brand and the way people feel about you with a new look, a new headline, new tone. And so it does kind of give you a little bit of lift and a new way to talk about yourselves that hasn't been there for the past couple of years.
How has the market changed? How we delivered services changed? What is the world looking for from us? Has any of those strategic levers changed? Then we need to reevaluate how we're telling the world our story.
I think in today's world, the answer is probably going to be yes.
Yes.
Right. The world's changing very quickly. Okay, so look, maybe people watching this might be wondering, like, messaging, like, why do I need to care about this? So why does messaging matter? Like, and think about it in terms of identity and awareness building, retention of current customers, differentiation, cohesive and consistent storytelling, creating that emotional connection. Like, talk to the audience a little bit about those elements.
Yeah, I mean, it's all those things that you mentioned. The one that always jumps out to me, and I've been coming around more and more to, is because it seems like it's that starting point. It does forge an identity for you beyond, we do managed IT. It starts to bring some personality and some color in the same way that when you walk into a room for a job interview, how you present yourself, the first things that you say, like, really set the tone for what's going to happen thereafter. It's not everything, but you really start to establish an identity for the people on the other side of the screen or on the other side of a phone call if you're on a sales call, to really start grabbing onto and connect with as well. So, I mean, from that, you can build off, and you can tell a cohesive story, and you can really start to fill in the colors and those personality traits that you want. But I've really just come around to the idea that it's just, it's that you are establishing an identity that somebody can quickly connect with and move from there and remember as well. So it's.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And what you said about on a sales call, in an email, in a message that you don't even think, okay, this is my website, these are the ads I'm creating. They think about messaging as living just there, but it doesn't. Messaging goes way beyond that. It is the drumbeat that your entire organization has to start walking to, right? So salesmen know how to talk the talk so that it's all cohesive for everybody to be on the same page.
I think one of the things that is important and becoming even more important, we talk a lot about sort of the noisy, chaotic digital landscape, and it's not getting less crowded. Like, there's more websites, there's more digital ads, there's more emails, there's more social posts than ever before, and tomorrow it'll be even more than today. Since this is specifically about B2B, and since we know that most B2B companies go with something that's very direct and very bland and very boring, very few companies that we work with is it that I visit your website for the first time and I'm buying it right now. there's a decision process. Sometimes it's fairly long. And there can be some information gathering, there can be some evaluation that's going on, and I take it to somebody else. If you can stand out by having a message, imagery, a story that is different than everyone else and makes an emotional connection, when it comes time to go and make that decision and remember who was it that I want to talk to, you already have that leg up because yours is elevated above the rest, because you're not the one of five that is, we do managed IT, so do we, but better than them. It's like, it just gives you that little bit of competitive edge by sticking to their memory.
Yeah, it's not easy work either. Differentiation and presenting yourself uniquely in the world is not an easy exercise. And it's very easy to have the same message as everybody else, but the hard work is in defining who we are and why we do things differently. We've worked with dozens of IT firms over the years, and the process that we take them through almost inevitably reveals something unique. It may not be a Nike uniqueness necessarily, but each one of them attacks the problem in a different way. And if we could help them polish that up and tell the world why that matters to them and their pains, that starts to create some momentum in their message.
Great.
And I will add on there, because I always like to say this, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit later. Sometimes you work with companies and there's not something that's terribly unique, and they'll tell you, we all do things roughly the same, we think our team's nicer, better, smarter. Your message, the delivery of it, the craftsmanship around it, whether it's the copy or the design, that can be your differentiator. I mean, that's the Nike right there. I mean, you brought it up, and so I had to build on it.
Yeah, sneakers are sneakers, basically. Right?
How much better was Nike than Reebok, other than the fact that Just Do It campaign was just mind-blowingly good. And suddenly it's like, well, Nike's a better sneaker. Well, is it? I don't know. But I want them, so. Yeah.
So what is good messaging? Let's talk about some examples of what good messaging. Julie, why don't you take us out?
Sure. So what does good messaging do? Good messaging kind of reaches through the device that you're looking at, grabs you by the lapels and pulls you in. It's emotive, it's interesting, it's exciting, it touches you, gives you the feels. For me, that's what good messaging is. And it happens fast.
Oh, it's so fast. And, I've tried over the last few years to deconstruct what good messaging is, because, you want to make it into a formula and then be able to use that to build new messaging. And the more I try to deconstruct it, the more I encounter messages where it disproves it. But I can say in general, what I think is good messaging are those that very emotional. Like you you look at it and it's like it is. Within seconds, you just feel something, and it moves you, it stays with you. It's like a good song. It kind of just sticks with you a bit and keeps you thinking. And I think that's the other part for me. What are really good messages are those that oftentimes have layers, whether it's because the emotional part of it is acting on you enough that you're thinking about some aspect of your life, and this brings in some other memory, or if it's that it's literally like a double entendre and it's got layers of meaning that you stop and you think, and you're like, oh, that also means that and that. And so
Those
it's really
are my
smart
favorites.
and clever.
I like that, yeah.
It's smart and clever, and it keeps you kind of thinking. It's it's like a great meal.
This is sort of comes back to you after a moment. You get it at first, and you're like, oh, that's great. And then you go, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that always stay and stick with you. Is the ones that you have extra layers of meaning. I like that.
It's like really good food, where it's like you all have something where it's maybe really sweet, and you're like, oh, that's good. But that's it's that one-dimensional, it's sweet. And then there's that really outstanding meal where you eat it and then you're chewing it, and then it's like another wave of something else. And it's just sort of, you can savor it, it stays with you. It's really satisfying.
Okay, so let's talk about some really good B2C messaging, because there's so much of it. And then we'll transition into maybe some better B2B messages that rival some of the B2C messages. So I know each of us have our favorites. I'll start. I really enjoying Upwork's new story and messaging that features this corpsey looking executive and this very traditional conference room, and how business has changed, and their juxtapositioning these companies that are dying with these companies that have accepted this virtual workforce and are going to market very differently. I don't know if I specifically love the zombie character that they're using, but it does make me kind of get the point. Right. I get the point that I don't want to be that guy.
Does it bring up memories for you of having I mean, when I watched it, I actually like the zombie boss. It made me chuckle because you feel like you've had some of these conversations. I mean, it's very tongue-in-cheek.
I've definitely been in conference rooms like that, but I'm also on the older side of things, so maybe our younger audience maybe doesn't really get that, but it tells a really strong point. Like these old school businesses are going to die off, which should get me motivated to look at what Upwork is and figure out how I need to approach it.
I think one of the great things about that ad is that it could easily come off as very condescending and patronizing and sort of be, oh, well, we know better, but the use of humor and the zombie is a bit disarming. So you wouldn't be easily offended if you fall into that category. You'd probably chuckle and be like, yeah, maybe I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, they also did something very smart, and it's subtle, but they have these images of multi-screen people working with other people in the screen. So you can quickly see the difference between the old style and how people are working today, which I think helps. Maybe without that, it would be a little too, campy to be effective.
And speaking to a younger audience to some degree also, you go from that grayed out pale figure in the wooden conference room to a much more lively work environment. Who wouldn't want that for their workforce?
Right. By the way, didn't we do a zombie comp for somebody?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At least one.
Right. Well, we had a guy who worked for us who was into zombies. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, Julie, what are some of your favorites?
So I have two examples, and they couldn't be further apart in their style. One of them is the Dove Real Beauty campaign. And speak about omnichannel, that message had the legs to go everywhere. And it started with TV commercials where they were really challenging the concept of what beauty is for a woman, and telling women, young women, that they didn't have to conform to the standard of beauty that was set forth by Vogue and all of the, the fashion icons and the impossible measures women had to get to be beautiful. And they were showing unvarnished views of what a woman looks like, and then what a woman on a magazine looks like after she's been made up, airbrushed, photoshopped, her neck lengthened, her eyes made big. It's crazy. Right. But what I loved about that campaign is it became a movement, and it really empowered young women, and there was a social media effort behind it. Very strong. I'm getting chills thinking about it. Very emotional, And then there's the other side of the equation, which is the Old Spice commercials. I'm sure everybody remembers what they were. You could probably picture the guy on the horse in your head when you see it. And what I loved most about that campaign was that it took this tired old brand and infused life into it and a reverence into it with its message, and everybody remembered them. That's what is good messaging, right? If you can remember that message after the fact and talk about it with your friends and your neighbors, that's a dollar well spent.
A bit of an overachiever. I came with 3. I actually had 4. I trimmed it down, but so my 3. The first one is Bombas, sock company. The Be Better, simple headline. Be Better, spelled B-E-E. The B. What I love about it is we talked about messages being the sort of like that opening to a really good story, and so from the inclusion of the bee, that's its own story about bees being part of a hive and each contributing and doing better, to this idea of being better. Better socks, they're great socks. I wear them religiously. But also Be Better, you buy a pair of socks, they give a pair to a homeless shelter. So I just love the very simple sentence, but layers upon layers, and the story goes on and on. It's a great example of how 2 words can really start a big story for you and can be a part of a huge, huge campaign. Second one I love, I go back to time and time again, is LL Bean did their, I'll call it Bean Outsider, which was, depending on how you want to read it, so this again plays on multiple levels. Bean Outsider was for their line of outside hiking apparel and clothes. But when you looked at it, it also read as be an outsider. So it was more action oriented and touched into identity and those that go outside. And there was also this part of it where they did an offshoot, which was be an outsider at work. And it was literally like outdoor clothing that you wore in the office, and it was really getting more into that a little bit more of that edginess. Like, you think of yourself as being different than your office mates because you like to hike and you like to, kayak. So go ahead, be an outsider at work. And I just love all those layers. And I remember walking past it, and I got a catalog from them one day and like doing a double, triple take because like each message was just hitting me. And I walked away and I was just like, wow, there's a lot there to take in. My last one, also from an outdoor company, is REI's.
I see a pattern here. You were also talking to me a couple of days ago about Patagonia. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, these outdoor apparel companies.
I think they do a good job. I think this will come up later. I think they do a good job of tapping into that identity of the persona to help create community as well. And we'll end up talking more about that.
Yeah.
But the REI one is this go out wherever you are, which I just think is genius because it's that play on that kids game, come out wherever you are, but we're doing it go out, and it's got a line of people going out, and like I was instantly awash in like memories of playing in my neighborhood when I was little, and it brings up like innocence and that desire to be outside when like that's all you wanted to do and everything you did, and I think that's just a great example of tying into the persona. This is what they want to be doing, but also that feeling of being young and free and innocent.
Let's talk about Patagonia for a second, because we talked about it a lot recently. And when you talk about brand and purpose, that goes a little bit above and beyond just selling stuff, that they do a phenomenal job. And where that CEO went at the end of his arc with that organization just really, for me, solidified the fact that their brand meant more than just selling expensive stuff.
Yeah. I think it's a great example of if you go and look at Patagonia's advertising, their story, if you go to their website, there's not that punchy one line. Mm-hmm. Occasionally you'll find it, but it is something like, it'll just be a news story, a headline. Patagonia gave away its company. And it's the story that, what do you mean? When you read it, and it creates customers. Like you and I had been talking forever. We're just like, oh yeah, Patagonia, it's expensive, it's nice. And then I read that, and this is I bought this like the very next day. Like, it's you buy it because it means something to you. It connects with you on an emotional level.
Right, and Bombas does the same thing.
Yes.
There's nothing easier than telling the story of a company that has some real purpose in the world.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just about socks.
No, it's not. And like I was telling you
Still
before,
great socks.
I think every sock I own, from my everyday socks to my running socks, are all Bombas at this point. But I was getting on a plane to travel a couple of months ago, and we're going through security, and you have to take your shoes off, and I look down, and the guy next to me who's got Bombas on, I got Bombas. You kind of give each other like that little, just like, you're all right. He could be a mass murderer, but in my book, he's like, he's a wonderful person because we've connected that, and that's the start of some community building.
So we obviously didn't have any trouble coming up with B2C messages,
Sure.
but next I want to talk a little bit about how B2B should maybe aspire to a higher level of messaging for their own businesses. Okay, so let's transition. We just talked about a lot of B2C examples. Everyone who's watching can relate to those. They'll know about those companies we talked about. But we work with B2B companies, so let's bring it back around to the kind of companies that might be watching the video. Bob, why do you think people, B2B leadership places so little value on the message they're saying? I mean, like I always say, it's a B2P exercise, right? The businesses are marketing to people. People make purchase decisions the same way, whether they're buying a stick of gum or a $200,000 piece of software. Like they're going through similar thought processes in their own head. Why do you think B2B companies spend so little time and energy coming up with an awesome message?
Yeah. To this day, I've been working in B2B 5 years now, and I'm still somewhat baffled. I did come from a B2C background, and so I was surprised because, like you, I agree. It's you're still selling to people. They still make emotional decisions. I think it's hard though in B2B. Oftentimes companies think about who they're selling to as like a body, an amalgamation. It's like it's an institution, an organization, and And those things don't have emotion, even though there's, people there that are making the decisions and discussing it. I think another consideration is in chicken or egg here, right? Skill set to talent. They don't have that talent in-house. So creativity has not always been valued within B2B marketing. It is very direct traditionally. And so you don't go out and hire creatives. And then when you want to do something creative, you don't have those people in-house. And so I think it becomes a challenge then, and you kind of settle for like, well, it's good enough to do this, and never discount the idea of what everyone else is doing. So as long as there's an environment in which 9 out of 10 of your competitors are doing exactly what you're doing, you're good.
Yeah.
Like, there's no risk, there's no loss,
Right.
and you're good. You're in a safe spot.
Right. There's another kind of nuance to this, which we talked about a little bit earlier. This concept of message and big story almost doesn't ever become an issue until a company decides to redo its website, right? Okay, what are we going to put on the homepage, right? And that task generally doesn't fall to leadership or someone who's trying to move the company forward. It falls to a marketing person, right? Who might not be comfortable pushing a message that is controversial or differentiated, right? What's the first thing they're going to do? Well, let's see what everybody else is doing. To your point, let's do something similar. No one's going to be mad at me if I do kind of what everybody else is doing. We'll fit right in. So it's almost like that catalyst needs to trigger a higher level conversation about, okay, how are we positioning the company, not what are we going to put on our website.
Right.
So sometimes maybe this message is getting kind of drawn into a project that is not appropriate for the scale of what it should be. That make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, you just do it every once in a while, and
easy.
it's, yeah, I mean, the safe and easy part, like we go, I find even with companies that are like, yeah, give me something different, what they mean is, could you show me a pair of gray khakis instead of tan khakis, and not acid wash jeans? Like, please don't make me, I don't want to stand out so badly that, like, I feel like I'm just out in the wind. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We talked a lot about B2B messaging and B2C examples. Let's talk about some good, solid B2B messaging.
Should we be transparent and say that these are all messaging
that we did?
Examples that we did?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So,
well, this happens to be something we're particularly good at. So yes, we're going to highlight good B2B messaging that we created.
So the first one, Elbico.
Mm-hmm. Tell us who Elbico is.
Elbico provides uniforms and equipment for public service, fire department, police, paramedics. You get the idea. Mm-hmm. Not terribly exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It's
not fashion.
It's not fashion. They came to us, and they are a legacy company. They had said to us, most people would probably think of us as their grandfather's uniform provider, and their competition was going more like in a tactical tactical gear. So they said, we just need help telling a better story. Our website looks old, we sound old, we need to appeal to sort of this younger group of guys coming in.
It was very centered around product, right? It was all about stuff.
Very product focused. You would go on, and it was one of the carryovers, or one of the things that was similar to a B2C site. It looked, special on firefighting pants this month. You'd have a promoted product, and so everything was very product focused.
So where did we go?
Where did we go? So we went with this headline, "Cut from a Different Cloth," which as we all discussed, we love emotion within messaging, and for me, this was a somewhat emotional client because my father was a firefighter. Mm-hmm. My brother-in-law is actually a captain within the corrections system, so I just grew up around all kinds of people within public service, right. But specifically my dad. I would wake up in the morning and I'd see him getting ready and putting on the exact uniforms that they sell, mm-hmm. And but beyond, it meant something because I knew who these people were. They lived different lives. You think
Lives
often
and
about,
service.
you think about running into buildings or chasing after criminals or showing up in a car crash and the danger that's involved with that. But sometimes what you forget is that's all true. But there's other parts. At least 2 or 3 holidays a year, I did not spend them with my dad. Or if I did, I saw him for an hour in the morning. He would come home from work and go and still coach us. He would spend nights, overnight. You sleep overnight on cots. So for 27 years, he slept half of his life on a cot, eating with people, and you miss out on big parts of your family's life. But you also forged this sort of, in fire department, they call it the brotherhood. There are these connections that they make. And so when I was thinking about coming up with this message, this is where I was going with it, is that these people, for them, it's not just a uniform. It is that identity. You see another fireman, another Jake going down the street, like you nod, you wave. Same thing with police officers. And so this idea of it being cut from a different cloth, these people, but also the big differentiator for Albico was that they were a legacy, and they would say, everyone knows we're the highest quality, but it's like we need this message. So it was sort of this layered message, this layered emotional message that spoke to the quality of what they do, but also the people that wear the uniform.
It gets back down to, this is not just about selling clothing. This is about the people who wear the clothing and what they are made of. So, it went to just a totally different level.
They knew, Albico had said that, like, unlike other B2B, this isn't going to like a CEO. It goes to groups of people that work at the department, and they make the buying decision. So it literally would be, it's the end users as a group, they're making that purchase decision. So having a story that they could connect with and they felt the people on the other end knew them was powerful.
That's great.
Yeah, shed a tear. It's nice.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I said I did. Okay, good. What else you got?
So Solver, a company that does corporate performance management software. It's a platform that ties into an ERP. It's software. We met them. They said a lot of the same things that we hear very often. We feel like we're doing something cool. We have something cool that we want to bring to the market very, very shortly. That's going to be very unique to us. We don't know how to announce that to the world or make it something that sticks with people, because honestly, what we do and what it does, what the platform does, is very complex, and it requires this whole story. And if you look at everyone's websites that we compete against, which you will, they're all saying different variations of the same thing. So can you please help us? And it turned out that what they were launching was the ability to integrate and implement their platform, or at least a portion of that platform, within one day, within 24 hours. Crazy fast.
Space.
Typically takes 90 days.
Tons
And
of pain there.
the company that is having it implemented, you pay for it. It's not like you're not paying for those 90 days, and so you can't use it. So you're paying for something you can't use for 90 days.
Teams are down during that period of time. Money is invested during that time.
There's nothing to show for it, which also puts pressure on the company, the corporate management, performance management software company, to very quickly after that 90 days show results, because they've been paying all along. So Solver said, we can do that in one day. And we said, well, this is amazing. And so there was some discussion, should we lean into this? We said, it's absolutely, you lean into it. And what we came up with was this headline of everything can change in a day. And again, meant to be sort of two-tiered. One, in that, yes, the platform can be installed in a day, can be implemented in a day, and literally change your company overnight. Most of these companies are going from Excel spreadsheets into a state of digital transformation. And this can happen, at least in some capacity for you, overnight.
And you could start making decisions overnight based on the data in the solution.
Exactly. You can start automating. There's all kinds of things that you could do that your company could never do before. One day.
Awesome examples of B2B messaging that really are emotional and compelling. Do you think lack of messaging in the B2B space is an opportunity for businesses today?
I think it's potentially a threat, don't you? I mean, if other organizations are starting to come to the table with better messaging, you know, your lack of it is a competitive disadvantage. But
yeah, I mean, you can look at it at both ways. I think right now, in the short term, the present, it's absolutely an advantage. Very few companies are doing it. So if you go out and you nail it, you're creating a situation where you're going to stand out, you're going to be memorable, and that's your competitive advantage. I think being complacent, like that opportunity, that advantage isn't going to last forever. We've, you know, with HubSpot's inbound this year, we saw that there was actually a lot of sessions around messaging and creating a creative message and creativity, which leads me to believe that you're going to see more of this happening. And soon it will go from being your competitive advantage to it's going to be what you have to do to keep up, to keep pace. You know, is that a year from now or 2 years from now? I don't know, but it's coming.
I also think a lot of the companies we end up talking to about working with us express this feeling like something's missing from what they're doing. And when we evaluate what they're doing, most of the time, one of the things that's missing is the message. There's other things too, but the message is missing most of the time when companies are kind of struggling to grow and struggling to generate leads and struggling to figure out, well, what's not working here. This answers some of the questions, I think, for them in terms of what might be missing.
It's a challenging thing to come up with. You know, we say, oh, it's everywhere in B2C, which is maybe generous because
there's plenty of B2C companies doing it badly also.
Yeah, there's the ones that do it really well. You know, it's that top part of the pyramid there, and so it's a challenging thing for any company to do, and so it's not surprising that it's the missing piece.
Right. We do this frequently, and we have a process and a system for helping clients come up with this. Julie, could you talk a little bit about what we go through that helps create the elements that our team uses to form these really amazing messages?
For sure. It's not just, you know, people playing foosball in a cool agency. It really is a process underneath the steps. It's the building blocks of creating the message that you're going to tell the world about. And, you know, it starts with understanding who you're selling to. Sounds so basic, but so many of our clients come in with just this very rough sketch of who they actually sell to. We create a very detailed picture of who that persona is. So we go through a persona exercise where we walk through psychographics and demographics and who are they and what industries are they in, how old are they, what are their pains. Key and primary to this messaging exercise is understanding the pains and the triggers that drive them to go seek an organization. So we go through that exercise, and then, you know, internally there are some brainstorms and some messaging discussions that help us start to now narrow in on, because, you know, we could just take that pain and put it as a hero message on the homepage, but that wouldn't be very emotional or compelling, even though it comes from something they suffer from. How do we take it to the next step? What do we do to get that message something that's quick and sharp and memorable?
That's the part of the process that's most challenging. Is you get to a certain point within the persona development and your brainstorm huddle, and it is that part of okay, this is pretty good, this is all right, and then like usually there's a point where myself as a writer or, you know, us as a partnership or bringing in design, where you're like, how do you gotta take it to that next level? It's going and kind of like not being satisfied with that pain point living atop the top of the page, and greatness, which, you know, I hate to use that word, but, you know, it is what we shoot for. Sure. Does require that, like, you know, not being afraid to fail in front of all of your coworkers and the clients with some idea that you think is fantastic, but, you know, we've had this happen many times where you're just like, no, we're not using that idea. So there's the process, and then it's like the other gear of the process, which is, you know, keep going till you get it.
I definitely think it's the process underneath
Yes.
it that moors it. It's not creativity unchecked, it is creativity directed.
Yeah.
You know, because without any guidelines and guideposts to say this is what is important to the personas that our clients are selling to, we could go in a million different directions and miss the mark entirely. And we don't miss the mark very often. We gave one example today of a shortfall, but generally speaking, we come back to the table with our clients and they're like, yeah. Because if you've walked them through a process that says, this is who you're selling to, this is what they care about, this is what their pains are, and this is how you solve it in a differentiated way, and then bam, there's the message, there's no arguing.
No. And generally, yeah, I think generally where we've fallen short, oftentimes, when you go through that process, like you said, if you follow the process and invest your time and energies in it, what you will find out is that the client, the business at the end is just like, yeah, that's good. I like that. We're our worst critics. We'll be like, does it fall into the top 3 of ones I've did? Because you're always trying to top yourself. Right. But when you follow the process, you generally do land at a place that's 9 times out of 10, 85% better than everything else that's out there within a client's competitive field.
Yeah.
Good, great. Just to tee up what we're going to talk about in the future, I'm sure some people watching might be, well, okay, great. I need a message. I'm excited. Well, what am I supposed to do with that, right? Like after it's done, how does that help my business grow and how does it generate leads? And the next episode we're going to go into as part of this series is going to talk about the role of messaging in community building. And community building might be a new phrase for a lot of the people watching, but it's kind of the new playbook going into 2023 that is going to be a requirement and one of those missing elements to what people do to really propel their businesses forward. Like if you want to talk about HubSpot specifically, they didn't sell software. They created a community around a specific methodology of which their software is supported. And I think the businesses that take their message and use it to build these communities are going to be the most successful businesses and the ones that really scale and grow aggressively. So that's something to look forward to in episode 2 of our series. Thanks everybody for being with us this entire time. I know it was a lot to take in, but it should really be something that you use aggressively going into 2023 and beyond to help your company stand out. And I know a lot of the people who follow Square 2, they don't want to just watch and be passive participants. They actually want to take some action. So good news, I promised you in the beginning of the show, we had some action-oriented steps for you to take. Anyone watching the show can go to www.square2marketing.com/B2B messaging and get a messaging workbook. It's the same workbook we use with clients, and you can use it in your organization to come up with equally compelling, emotional, engaging messages like the ones Bob and Julie shared with you today. Take it, use it, and you'll be in a very good space with your business. If, for those of you that want a little more personal hand-holding and help, we also have an offer for you. We are willing to review your current story and message and provide some ideas on how to improve it. Go to the same page. There's a different offer there where you can request a messaging session with one of our experts, and we'll get you set up with one of the specialists, and they will actually review your message and give you some feedback on how to improve it, just like we did today. Thank you all for joining. We really appreciate you, and stay tuned for episode 2. Thank you.